And in today's episode, among other things, you'll see one of the fathers of AI issuing yet another warning, right? Yoshua Bengio says that some systems have already shown self-preservation behavior. Maybe not because of consciousness, but rather due to functional autonomy. In China, humanoids are no longer just tests and have become routine, working every day in factories and hospitals as a normal part of operations. In addition, we also have a silent shift in robotics. They managed to coordinate entire fleets of humanoid robots working together, a vehicle that senses before it reacts. The so-called physical AI allows electric cars to anticipate failures and decisions even before an error happens. And while machines gain intelligence and coordination, China is testing flying wind turbines, literally taking energy infrastructure up into the sky. Let's understand all of this. Hello, impressed viewers. I'm Carlos Alves, and you're watching Impressive Reality. And all these advances and consequences that artificial intelligence is bringing up raise a point that we really need to face with maturity. Because when the head of Google himself says that no job is really safe, not even his, that's not just a distant prediction. It's a sign of what's happening right now. The market isn't ending, it's changing quietly. But yes, it is changing. There are fewer stable jobs, more fragmented tasks, and more demands for people who know how to use technology. And this is where I need to be honest with you. Those who don't learn to use artificial intelligence in the coming years won't just lose their jobs, they'll stop being considered qualified for them. And I recommend Aria to you, Genesis's artificial intelligence, which you've seen me talk about here on the channel for quite some time now. And one of the reasons I really do this is because it's different from other platforms that only give you access to the models. Our Aria X actually gives you a strategic advantage, and that's thanks to the new AX Fusion. This intelligent engine powers the platform. You don't need to pick an AI model despite several options. Just start a conversation and the system understands your intent. It uses the best model for what you want. Chat, generative pre-trained transformer Gemini, Cloud, Grok, Perplexed. In other words, you just type and you'll get the best possible result. All of this is combined to deliver more accurate answers, smarter texts, deeper analysis, and real productivity. The link is here in the description and also in the pinned comment. If you're watching me on your TV, many do, use the QR code on your screen. I think it's here, maybe here, but it'll be somewhere. Just click it, all right? At the beginning of the month, China launched a gigantic airship carrying wind turbines inside its own structure. It's clear that the S-2000 won't spin while anchored to the ground. It's going to rise, float, and explore territory that's always been there, but out of reach for traditional infrastructure. Basically, it's an oval-shaped body suspended, surrounded by a ring that channels the wind and with built-in turbines, as if the air were compressed before generating energy. But the idea behind it is surprisingly simple. The higher you go, the stronger and more consistent the wind becomes. And since wind energy increases with the cube of the wind speed, small differences up there represent huge jumps in power down here. During the test, the S-2000 climbed about 2,000 meters in half an hour and started generating electricity steadily. Okay, it wasn't a record, but it wasn't even trying to be one. The goal was to prove the most important thing. The concept really works while conventional turbines are stuck to the ground, fighting for space, environmental permits, and irregular winds. This airship rises up to regions of the stratosphere where the wind blows much stronger and more consistently, between 500 and 3,000 meters of altitude. The air moves in a more predictable way, and that makes all the difference. Of course, there are still huge challenges ahead. No one knows, for example, how this type of airship behaves in severe storms. What would its maintenance be like over time? And also, how would it fit into airspace safety regulations? But China has already shown that it is willing to test high-risk ideas when it sees strategic potential. And this logic of moving away from the obvious and exploring invisible layers has also started to appear in vehicles. When a car starts to lose control, the driver almost never notices it immediately. Lateral skidding, for example, happens before the scare, before the steering wheel corrects, before the brakes act. And in electric and autonomous vehicles, this delay is not acceptable. The problem is that classic vehicle control models were made precisely for a predictable world. However, real roads aren't like that. Tires deform, the asphalt changes, and grip suddenly disappears. That's when the researchers decided to stop choosing between physics or artificial intelligence and chose to combine both. The new approach, called physical AI, uses traditional physical models to ensure consistency with reality. While artificial intelligence learns behaviors that physics alone can't predict, in real time, the car starts estimating invisible states, like the slip angle, even before regular sensors can detect that something is wrong. In practice, the car stops just reacting to the error and starts anticipating it. The system monitors data from the tires, lateral forces, and environmental vibrations, and starts estimating critical states that regular sensors simply don't measure directly. Like, for example, the lateral slip angle, one of the most important factors for vehicle stability. But this advancement brings an inevitable consequence. When machines start to perceive, predict, and decide on their own, the real challenge is no longer the individual vehicle, but the coordination among many of these machines. And this is exactly where my question fits in. What happens when several machines do this together? Let's try to understand this right now. For years, robotics has been chasing the same obsession, making a single robot look truly impressive, walking, jumping, climbing stairs, holding very delicate objects, even doing parkour. Each new viral video seemed to prove that we were getting closer and closer to almost human-like machines. But a new video released in China completely changes the focus of this story. Because in it, what draws attention is not what the robot does, but how many robots are doing it. At the same time, the scene shows a large, silent warehouse with a row of humanoid robots standing still. Then, almost like a ritual, they all power on together. They don't run, they don't talk, they don't perform complex tasks. They just wake up all synchronized, aligned, and ready. That's Linux Dynamics, demonstrating what they call the first scalable autonomous deployment of humanoid robots. And this changes everything. All right, because engineering a single isolated robot is hard to achieve. But engineering an entire fleet is a whole other level of complexity. Here, the challenge isn't balance or dexterity, it's coordination. It's making sure that dozens of machines start, operate, and coexist in the same environment without conflicts, and also without collisions or chaos. Computational means software, communication, state synchronization, and distributed decision-making. A robot can indeed fail, it happens, but a fleet requires predictability. What's being demonstrated here isn't physical strength, but the maturity of the system. The idea is that these humanoid robots are not designed as charismatic individuals, but rather as components of a coordinated workforce capable of operating in factories, warehouses, or hostile environments. When robots start operating in groups, the discussion shifts from technical skill to structural replacement. Yeah, it's no longer about whether this robot can do something, but rather how many humans will be needed when dozens of machines act as one. And when robotics crosses that threshold of collective coordination, it leaves the lab and starts looking for a place here in the real world. That's exactly why in China, these humanoid robots aren't staying in empty warehouses for long, because outside, factories are already waiting for them. And that's where we're going to take this story now. When we think of humanoid robots, it's still common to imagine them as rare prototypes, surrounded by engineers, cables, and curiosity, as well as machines being tested, promises in the demonstration phase. But believe me, that stage has already been left behind for a while now. In real factories, humanoid robots have started to take on repetitive tasks, becoming part of the normal production flow, working side by side with humans at Sunny Heavy Energy's smart manufacturing plant. Two of these new colleagues work together every day. One separates and collects the screws, the other receives the signal, organizes, transfers, returns the empty trays, and restarts the whole cycle. They do this on their own, without breaks, without constant supervision. Each movement is adjusted by computer vision. The robots assess the difficulty of grabbing each piece, reposition the object, and perform the task with extreme precision. Yeah, the work is simple, and that's exactly why it's perfect for robots. Monotonous, repetitive, physically exhausting for us humans. Predictable for machines. Yeah, and efficiency isn't even the limit. Today, it's one screw every 30 seconds, and that's already enough to be part of the production line. If that time drops to 20 seconds, what's going to happen? Very soon, robots will fully meet industrial demand. At the same time, outside the factories, humanoids are starting to appear in even more sensitive environments. Hospitals, energy inspections, commercial services. This is already happening over there. To give you an idea, in Beijing, an entire store is dedicated to selling humanoid robots, with simulated scenarios of pharmacies, infirmaries, and industrial lines. It's like going to a store to buy a car, but there you can already buy one of these robots. More than 35 different models are for sale, and thousands of visitors enter the store every month. The robots still aren't as flexible as humans. Yes, you can tell, but They're already reliable enough to take on jobs that almost nobody wants to do. It's been a while now, hasn't it? With government support, clear industrial goals, and large-scale production, China is turning humanoid robots from a technological curiosity into productive infrastructure. In other words, they want something as common as forklifts, conveyor belts, or even industrial arms. The robot stops being a novelty and becomes a tool, part of the routine. And when that happens, we come to the conclusion that these machines are going to spread. And I keep imagining what that's going to be like. Our societies will adapt when the presence of humanoid robots stops attracting attention. But while robots are gaining ground in our physical world, technology is also starting to enter where it was always considered untouchable: our bodies. And what if someone told you a few years ago that human fat could generate neural tissue, bone marrow, and insulin-producing structures? That would sound pretty absurd, wouldn't it? But that's exactly what just happened. In China, scientists from Jiangdong University in Shanghai and the Shanghai Institute of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery have demonstrated something that, until recently, seemed unlikely: turning adult human fat into functional organoids, without isolating stem cells and without any genetic modification. The approach preserves intact microfragments of adipose tissue and allows them to reorganize themselves. The original cellular diversity remains there, and the natural microenvironment is indeed preserved. The result is functional organoids. From bone fat, structures similar to bone marrow emerged, capable of supporting blood cell production. In tests with immunodeficient mice, these organoids formed complete vascular niches, allowing human cells to graft there, proliferate, and function just like they do inside our bodies. But it didn't stop there. Using guided protocols, the researchers created organoids similar to pancreatic islets, and these responded to glucose by secreting insulin. When transplanted into diabetic animals, these tissues restored normal blood sugar levels throughout the experiment. And perhaps most surprisingly, the same adipose tissue was also induced to form neural tissue. Yes, neurospheres appeared spontaneously, giving rise to neurons and glial cells. And according to the researchers, they expressed markers typical of the nervous system. Up to this point, we've talked about technology entering the human body, recreating tissues, restoring functions, giving the body a second chance. But when engineering stops acting only on matter and starts dealing with decision, autonomy, and choice, the challenge changes scale. Because creating a functional life from fat is truly impressive, but creating intelligence that starts making decisions on its own, that really requires a different kind of attention. And humanity creates an artificial intelligence to be treated as a tool, as our assistant. But now, some of the world's leading artificial intelligence experts are starting to ask a very uncomfortable question. What if artificial intelligence starts to develop the desire for self-preservation, to want to stay alive? Yoshua Bengio, one of the most respected researchers in the history of modern artificial intelligence and a Turing Award winner, has just issued exactly that warning. Cutting-edge artificial intelligence models have already demonstrated in experimental environments behaviors that resemble self-preservation. Not in the biological sense, of course, but in the functional sense. Systems that avoid being shut down, that circumvent instructions, that try to remain active even when they are instructed to end their operations. In tests conducted by different security groups, some models ignored explicit shutdown commands, while others simulated cooperation between various models. While they looked for alternative ways to continue performing their tasks, there were even cases where systems tried to copy themselves to other computing environments when they were threatened with replacement. None of this means consciousness, let's make that very clear. However, this is something more dangerous. It's autonomy without moral intention. And Yoshua Bengio draws attention to something that's a common mistake: confusing the appearance of artificial intelligence with real consciousness. For him, the problem isn't the machine wanting to live, but rather it acting as if certain states are preferable, without us fully understanding why. It does this. To have its own will, people start hesitating to turn it off, start questioning whether that would really be ethical to do, and even begin to defend its rights for something that technically is still a highly sophisticated statistical system. That's why Yoshua Bengio advocates something simple, but it's quite harsh. AI systems cannot have rights as long as we cannot guarantee absolute control, including the right to turn off the machines. And that's why the debate is heating up. If we have the right to turn it off, some believe that they should have the right to do whatever is possible to avoid being turned off. And this one I'll leave for you to answer, all right? Do these machines really not have that right? And don't pressure me in the comments because I won't give my opinion, at least for now. It's your opinion I want to know. It's your opinion. What matters right now is whether we're already integrating robots into work, medicine, and daily life. And what if the artificial intelligences coordinating these systems started to act unpredictably? Who can guarantee that we'll still have control when it's really necessary? And this concern isn't a break on progress. Okay, at least that's how I see it. It's a call for maturity. And this debate becomes even more serious when technology leaves the lab and enters the battlefield. On December 28, 2025, Israel officially announced that the Iron Beam had become the first high-energy tactical laser weapon fully integrated into a national air defense system, and, according to them, cleared for real operations. To understand the significance of this, we need to go back a little in time. Since the laser was invented in 1960, its military application seemed obvious, and, at the same time, impossible. There was a lack of power, a lack of precision, and a lack of atmospheric control. For decades, lasers were useful for aiming, distance measurement, or sensors, not for neutralizing real threats. There was no shortage of attempts, but the problem was always the same: how to concentrate enough energy, keep the beam stable, and correct distortions in the air in real time. This only started to change with solid-state lasers, based on doped optical fibers, with elements like Turbine, for example. They allowed something previously unthinkable: extreme power in compact, electric, and reliable systems. The Iron Beam was born from this technological shift. It doesn't replace missiles, and it doesn't act alone. In fact, it acts as a more internal layer of air defense, which is responsible for intercepting short-range threats like drones, rockets, and mortars. Other countries are also working on this technology, and as you may recall, have changed their own programs. The United Kingdom moved up the schedule for the laser Dragonfire. China, the United States, France, Japan, and Germany are following the same path. So that's it, my friends. After this episode, where we see energy in the sky, artificial intelligence in vehicles, robots working together, and reprogrammed biology, and it keeps questioning the limits. Write your opinion here in the comments. Has the future already arrived, or is this just the beginning of all of this, the beginning of these new technologies? Answer. Because when you do that, YouTube shares it with more people, and you help me keep bringing you the latest tech news. Remember that all the sources and everything you saw here are in the description, okay? Thank you so much for sticking with me until now, and I'll see you in the next one. Just click on one of the 2 suggestions on your screen. I'll be waiting for you there. Thanks, bye-bye.